Hello, this non-dual lectionary is for Pentecost Sunday, and there's a gospel reading in the lectionary for year C that is from the Gospel of John, actually. It's beautiful, um, but in my experience, usually on Pentecost Sunday, we read this section from Acts. It's listed as an alternate reading in the lectionary, so that's what I'm going to focus on today. uh, the sort of traditional uh, reading from Acts on Pentecost. So, as usual, I will read that first. Acts chapter 2, verses 1 through 21, the coming of the Holy Spirit. When the day of Pentecost had come, they were all together in one place. And suddenly from heaven there came a sound like the rush of a violent wind, and it filled the entire house where they were sitting. Divided tongues as of fire appeared among them, and a tongue rested on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other languages as the Spirit gave them ability. Now there were devout Jews from every people under heaven living in Jerusalem. And at this sound the crowd gathered and was bewildered, because each one heard them speaking in the native language of each. Amazed and astonished, they asked, "Are not all of these who are speaking Galileans? And how is it that we hear each of us in our own native language?" And then a bunch of listings of the different languages. All were amazed and perplexed, saying to one another, "What does this mean?" But others sneered and said, "They are filled with new wine." But Peter, standing with the 11, raised his voice and addressed them. "Fellow Jews and all who live in Jerusalem, let this be known to you, and listen to what I say. Indeed, these are not drunk, as you suppose, for it is only 9 o'clock in the morning. No, this is what was spoken through the prophet Joel. In the last days it will be, God declares, that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams. Even upon my slaves, both men and women, in those days I will pour out my spirit, and they shall prophesy. And I will show portents in the heaven above and signs on the earth below, blood and fire and smoky mist. The sun shall be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the coming of the Lord's great and glorious day. Then everyone who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. Ooh, so there's a lot going on here. I want to focus on three things, each of them a little, just kind of briefly. The first is in the first paragraph here, that first experience. Um, Everyone's gathered together, and suddenly there's a sound like the rush of violent wind. It fills the whole house. Tongues of fire appear with all of them. And I mean, again, I think this is just another, well, forget just. I think the resonance for me and for a lot of people that I read and talk to in this kind of general area is this is an experience that people have. It's a description. It's a little bit poetic, but not really, not much poetic. Um, if you go on enough retreats, if you sit in enough meditation halls, um, these kind of experiences happen. The rush of sound, the sense of something on fire. Um, People will be overcome with huge feelings of, I mean, all sorts of different things. I mean, but yeah, I mean, I think this is just a description. Somebody, especially if it's passed down orally, this is just somebody's describing an experience that at least one person had, and maybe multiple people had together. Um, we often call these spiritual experiences. They can be if spiritual isn't your language so much, there's still, big openings. They can be glimpses into, something bigger, something beyond self, and it can, especially as our small self, as our ego self tries to make sense of it, put it together. Um, when we kind of do contract back down, instead of staying open, it can, all these things can show up. It can feel like wind, it can feel like fire, it can feel like an abyss, right? Open sky. Um, those last two, I've had experiences that feel like that. Um, so in any event, I think, here we just have kind of a description that, you know, we see sometimes. The next paragraph where people are talking about, the other people that are gathered, right? And it's, oh wow, what is this like? Hey, they're all speaking in our language, all that. Now, um, yeah, you can read this as a miracle, right? But from kind of just, that again, if we're talking about the non-dual recognition, the no self perspective, I think what this gets at is a really poetic description of kind of that universality of it, right? That that really does get connected to all of us beyond language, beyond creed or religion, even. You see similar experiences throughout the world in different wisdom traditions and different spiritual traditions. So, hey, the amazing thing here, right? How are these people connecting this to all of us, right? How are they able to evoke that experience? Speaking about God's deeds of power, but how are they able to evoke that experience in all of us from different places, from different times? Because there's that universality, right? Um, and you can experience that internally, right? The non-dual recognition is in some sense, right? That sense of oneness, non-separateness, not two, not one. But it also connects outward too. And then the last part, right? Peter's saying, right, because the little link here, right, is some people go, "Wow, what does that mean?" And others are gonna, that they can't let that in. Okay, so some people are open to that, some people can't let it in, and that's common experience too. And then and then Peter steps in and says, "No, no, no, this is real, right?" But he quotes this from Joel, and I do just want to sit on this part from Joel because each of those pieces, again, through that lens of the non-dual recognition or that no self or that true self, whatever you want to call it, true nature. All of this really, is it's evocative, and I really do mean it like it talks to that part that already knows this. In the last days, right? And so we hear that historically, right? In the end times, or when the either the world is near death or I'm near death. But when I'm near death, another way of talking about that is on the verge of the opening, right? On the verge of realizing the eternal nature when something beyond time does show up. And that in that sense, those are the last days, right? And spirit is poured out upon flesh, right? Because to the extent that we call that non-dual recognition divine, as people have across the world, right? It's that matter is not separate from that, right? Um, and so when we say prophesy, we often look at foretelling the future, but that doesn't have to be foretelling the future either, right? It can be opening to true nature. Um, so visions and sons and daughters prophesying, and even slaves, right? It's not separate from anyone. It's open to everyone, men and women, even upon slaves. I mean, this is when you think about the context of the time, right? Now we're talking about the Hebrew scriptures, even pre-Jesus's time. But when we're talking about bringing in slaves and women and men and sons and daughters, everybody's embraced in this. Wow, that is just somebody knowing, having that recognition and knowing that this is open to everybody, because it's everyone's true nature. And then the portents too, right? Again, and this goes back to, what sounds like a description out there is something that's really in here, right? When we talk about that experience. And in the end, the out there and in here aren't separate, but signs on the earth below, blood and fire and sun and darkness. And I mean, that's just a beautiful description of going beyond the apparent opposites, the oneness without new two-ness, and the non-two-ness that's not oneness, not two, not one. So yeah, all of this, I mean, Pentecost, does evoke like this big stuff, right? This kind of it's pretty challenging towards that mainline Protestant view, that kind of keeps us in that sort of everything's a little bit rational and everything, don't get too crazy on me, right? And here we've got Pentecost where they're talking about tongues of fire and wind and end times and speaking in tongues and all that. But again, um, it should be challenging to a mind that wants to put it all in neat little categories, because that mind is the thing that's sometimes clouding true nature, right? And gets in the way of what is. And in a context like this, sometimes what is challenging, and it is open to it is opening up to something that, our minds wouldn't expect, because that's what needs to happen often for us to open up truly to fully what is.